The end of spring weather can be unpredictable, and this month's unexpected rain and warmth had me mowing the lawn sooner than usual. Last year, we had a blizzard around this time, so mowing early seemed like a small price to pay to avoid snow. With tax season over, it felt great to be outside. My backyard slopes down to a stream and woods, with the basement exposed at the back due to the leveled front yard. This design allows me to store lawn equipment in the basement, which I love. After mowing, I was eager to shower due to my grass allergies. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard my wife talking with her friend, which wasn't surprising, until I caught what they were saying, making me pause before opening the door. My name is Robert Crane, but everyone calls me Bob. Back in school, I got the nickname Hogan after the actor from Hogan's Heroes, even though it was before my time. I graduated with an accounting degree and earned my CPA quickly. Now, I lead a team at a large Philadelphia firm specializing in forensic analytics to uncover fraud and money laundering. My work has even led to consulting for the FBI. I met Ashley during our junior year while she was pursuing political science and business aiming for law school. She was tall and slender, with long strawberry blonde hair and a striking presence that captivated me immediately. Sadly, Ashley didn't sit next to me or end up in my group for any projects. It took me a month to work up the courage to talk to her. I cracked a silly joke, and to my relief, she laughed. A real hearty laugh, not just a polite chuckle. We started chatting, and I asked if she'd like to grab coffee with me after class. "I've been hoping you'd ask me for weeks," she said with a smile. For the last 2 years of college, we were hardly ever apart. Our parents weren't thrilled at first, but we moved in together for our senior year. Eventually, they saw how committed we were and got used to the idea. I thought things couldn't get any better, but they did. After graduation, I quickly secured a job at a major public accounting firm in Philadelphia. The salary was impressive for a 22-year-old just starting out. Ashley got accepted into Penn's law school, so we decided to stay in our student apartment. My company offered to cover my MBA, so I was taking classes as well. I used SEPTA for my daily commute, which made owning a car unnecessary and helped save money. 3 years later, Ashley graduated, and I proposed to her during her celebration dinner at Morton's Steakhouse in Rittenhouse Square. We were married 6 months later. Ashley took a job as a deputy district attorney in Bucks County, north of Philly. We chose to buy a house in Doylestown, where the courthouse was located, and the regional rail line ended. This way, I could take the train to work every day. Although the commute was 80 minutes one way, it was better than dealing with the Squeal-Kill Expressway, or I-95 traffic. Ashley and her mother picked out the house. It was a great starter home with 3 bedrooms. One room would be set up as an office with 2 desks, one for me since I'd be working from home occasionally, and one for Ashley's legal work. The other bedroom would be a guest room, and the last room was our master bedroom. It was also conveniently close to her parents' house, which Ashley pointed out would be handy for babysitting when we had kids. Being an only child, I always wanted siblings. Ashley and I had talked about having children since our junior year and decided to wait until she was settled in her career. Now that we were ready, we agreed 2 nights ago to stop her birth control and start trying for a baby. I was happier than I had ever been, and that's when the sound I heard made my hand freeze on the doorknob. "Ashley and I decided it's time for me to get pregnant," Ashley exclaimed with excitement. Her friend Nicole Watkins immediately reacted with an equally enthusiastic, high-pitched squeal that made me think of whales stranded on the Jersey Shore trying to join in. While I stood on the stairs, I couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm, which matched my own joy at the thought of becoming a father. Just as I reached for the doorknob again, a question made my smile disappear and took away my happiness. "That's fantastic, Ash," Nicole said. "But what about Paul?" "Paul?" "Shh," Ashley whispered urgently. "Hogan is outside mowing the lawn." There was a brief pause, and I could almost picture her scanning the area, waiting for me to appear. Then she continued speaking. "I've already told Paul that I'm ending things with him. He was okay with it. With Grossman stepping down from the Senate, Paul thinks he actually has a chance at the seat. Being caught having an affair with a married employee would definitely hurt his chances." Just like that, 3 sentences shattered my world. Paul Evans was Ashley's boss at the DA's office. A widower in his mid-40s, he had lost his wife Anne to cancer, leaving him to raise their daughter Barbara alone. Paul was deeply involved in politics, and Ashley had shared stories about his political maneuvers aimed at advancing his career. Now I realized how my wife had access to all that behind-the-scenes information. "Really?" Nicole asked. "Just quitting cold turkey?" You've been involved with him for 6 months, and now you're just going to walk away from him? Her teasing tone made me want to lash out at her. I had known Nicole from Penn, and although she was now Ashley's best friend, I thought she was still my friend too. It turns out I was wrong. "Stop it," Ashley said, laughing. "You're so naughty. Paul was a great lover, but he was just a bit of fun. I love Hogan, but Paul only used me for closeness and power. There was no love, just raw desire. Now that Bob and I are planning a baby, I don't want any complications. I love Hogan, and I'm committed to being a good and faithful mother." I wondered how many more cliches we were going to have to endure. Finding a strange car in the driveway and discovering them in bed together would complete the nightmare. The urge to burst into the room and scream or to destroy everything in sight was overwhelming. But my body felt paralyzed. Stunned, I was unable to move, and my heartbeat thudded in my ears. "So quitting completely?" Nicole nudged. Ashley responded with another giggle. "Not exactly cold turkey," Ashley confessed. "I have a conference with Paul in Pittsburgh next week. We'll have our final fling there. I'll miss the closeness, but Hogan and the baby are more important." I couldn't handle it any longer, but I didn't know what to do next. Loving Ashley was tearing me apart. My business instincts kicked in, and I realized I needed to step back and plan my next move. Making a loud racket on the steps, I acted like I was coming up the stairs. When I opened the door and entered the kitchen, Ashley and Nicole were sitting there with their teacups. Was there a hint of guilt on Ashley's face? "Are you okay, honey?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. It dawned on me that my cheeks were wet with tears. "Allergies," I muttered. "Spring's going to be rough." "Go upstairs and take a shower," she said. "Just leave your clothes outside the bathroom and I'll wash them right away so they don't mess up your closet. I bought you a new box of Claritin D last week and it's in the medicine cabinet." "Thanks," I said as I headed for the stairs. I needed some time to think. The next morning was Monday, and I took advantage of an early meeting to slip out of the house before Ashley woke up. The night before, I'd used my allergies as an excuse to go to bed early because I was overwhelmed with emotions. As I rode the train, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had overheard. On one side, my wife had been unfaithful, but claimed she was ending it to stay with me and have our child. Some might say I should accept that and be thankful she's returning to our marriage with the intention of being a good wife and mother. However, a voice in my head questioned if she might do it again in the future. Would she have another Just Act affair once the kids are in school? If that happened, a divorce would involve the kids, and Ashley would likely get custody, while I'd face hefty alimony and support payments. As an accountant and business analyst, I was trained to think about risk and reward. This situation was no different. My trust in her was shattered. The excuse of just act overlooks the core issue. It's the utter lack of respect shown to the partner. If the cheater truly didn't think their actions would hurt the other person, they'd be open about it, and I would have known all along. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't have accepted her being with Don, but at least if she had talked to me about it, some respect would have been shown. Ashley's behavior demonstrated just how little she truly respected me. I went through my workday, but my mind was preoccupied with what to do next. Without solid evidence beyond the conversation I overheard, I hadn't noticed any signs of the affair over the past 6 months. Confronting Ashley directly without proof seemed risky and unlikely to yield any reward. Ashley would deny it, and Paul Evans would deny it. Pursuing the case in court would be financial ruin, as every judge, politician, and lawyer in the area knew Evans. I'd be buried to protect his reputation. Leaving and starting fresh somewhere else crossed my mind. The idea was tempting, but the house would feel like a burden. Since Ashley couldn't afford it on her own and we had little equity, she'd need to sell it quickly to avoid foreclosure. In today's market, that would be nearly impossible, and it would ruin both our credit scores. As a CPA, having poor credit would make it hard to get a new job. If you can't manage your own finances, how can others trust you with theirs? Before taking any action, I needed solid proof. It was surprising where I eventually found it. 3 days later, although I was trying to stay composed, I still had no concrete evidence to support what I had overheard. Her personal laptop was clean. There were no secret email accounts, no provocative lingerie hidden away, and no suspicious receipts. Everything seemed clear. Then Ashley called me at work to say we were invited to a party at Paul Evans' home on Friday night. I figured it was his big announcement for his U.S. Senate candidacy. I was tempted to make a grand revelation, but without evidence, it felt pointless. We arrived right on time for the event. Evans had a sizable McMansion near Washington Crossing with a small horse farm. A large tent was set up in the backyard for guests. When we walked in, Evans was at the head of the receiving line, acting like royalty. As a widower, he didn't have a wife to host, so he'd apparently enlisted his 21-year-old daughter to help. She greeted guests with a practiced ease. When it was our turn, Evans greeted Ashley with a broad smile, saying, "Ashley, you made it! How wonderful!" He gave her a polite kiss on the cheek before turning to me. "Robert, great to see you again. I'd be lost without your wife, but I hear you'll need to let her go soon as you start expanding the family." He laughed at his own joke. "Just make sure to return her to me when you're done, and there'll be no hard feelings." Another laugh followed. While Ashley blushed slightly, I was seething inside. His smug comment clearly had an underlying meaning that he thought I missed. "I'm not sure what the future holds," I replied in a flat, neutral tone, lacking any warmth. It was similar to how I would report audit results, professional but detached. Evans actually turned pale, and Ashley nudged me, whispering about my rudeness. Evans then smoothly moved on to the next guest, leaving us with his daughter. Though I was seething inside, I couldn't help but notice Barbara Evans, who was stunning. Her dark red hair and radiant smile reminded me of a young Maureen O'Hara. While Ashley resembled a busty ballerina, Barbara looked like she should be on a swimsuit calendar next to Kate Upton. With her striking looks, healthy figure, and perfect skin, she was every photographer's dream. Paul Evans had crafted the ideal political family. He appeared to be the quintessential wise statesman and family man. The death of his wife from cancer had made her the perfect martyr. Attacking her would be political ending. Barbara, his daughter, was the perfect princess. Homecoming queen, a senior at Penn majoring in business and pre-law, a former gymnast, and now a member of the Penn cheerleading squad. According to Ashley, Barbara planned to audition for the Eagles cheerleading squad at their next open call, now that she was 21. With a saintly deceased wife and a beautiful, smart, photogenic daughter, Evans was set to win over the press. "Robert!" Barbara exclaimed, hugging me warmly. This was more than a polite party hug. It was a genuine, enthusiastic embrace. Her body pressed against mine in a surprisingly pleasant way. "You look fantastic. No wonder Ashley keeps you hidden away. You never come to our parties. You should take it easier. Working too much isn't good for you." She managed to say all that in one breath. My anger shifted to complete shock instantly. I made a few polite comments about how great she looked and tried to move away. But then I realized two things. First, Barbara hadn't greeted Ashley. Second, what parties was she talking about? Ashley didn't give me a chance to ask, as she quickly jumped in with her own greeting to Barbara. We had no choice but to let the next guests take their turn in line. As Ashley and I moved through the crowd, I couldn't help but wonder what Barbara knew. After getting a drink for my wife, I asked, "What was Barbara talking about with all these parties?" Ashley just gave a dismissive smile and snorted. "Oh, she's just being a little brat. Paul sometimes holds team meetings and strategy sessions here. He says he thinks better with a drink in hand, and you never know who might be nearby at a bar. She's been around a few times when we've met here. And don't tell anyone, but Paul let her have drinks at home even before she turned 21. That explained where it was happening. The jerk was having an affair with my wife right here at his house under the guise of team meetings. They might even have real meetings where Ashley stayed until the end. Or maybe she left early and came back after everyone else had gone. That way, a team of lawyers would be less likely to question why Ashley stayed behind to help the boss clean up. With his wife gone and his daughter in college, he had no need for a discreet hotel room. Hence, no records of their rendezvous. "Does Barbara attend these team meetings?" I asked. Ashley brushed off the question. "No, she's just been home a few times when her classes were canceled. She's only teasing her dad about having parties during work hours." She pulled on my arm. "Come on, love. Let's get you a drink." For the next hour, Ashley stayed close to me, never more than a foot away. We chatted with several of her coworkers, and a few mentioned our plans to start a family. They expressed their sadness about losing Ashley for a while, but were excited for us. Honestly, it felt a bit awkward. Why did so many people know about our plans? An hour later, Paul Evans called for everyone's attention. Standing beside him with a smile was his daughter. He began by thanking everyone for attending and then moved into his major campaign announcement. Even though it was expected, everyone acted enthusiastic. I noticed the local paper's publisher and one of his reporters taking notes nearby. "It's clear this will be a major story in tomorrow's edition. I won't drag you through the rest of the party details. It could have been a pleasant evening if my heart wasn't in pieces and my mind wasn't racing, trying to find proof of what I'd heard." About 90 minutes after the big announcement, Margaret Williamson, the first assistant district attorney, came over to say that Paul wanted to meet with his staff. Margaret, who ran the office while Paul was an elected official, was the real powerhouse there. DAs changed every 4 years, but Margaret was a constant presence. Known for her toughness as well as her honesty and integrity, she was highly respected in the legal field. Ashley took the job partly because of Margaret. I liked her too. Margaret had been married for over 30 years to an electrician who supported her through college and now ran a successful electrical contracting business. Their devotion to each other always seemed like a model for Ashley and me. "Sorry to take your wife away, Hogan," Margaret said. "Paul wants to go over office organization after he's done with his campaigning." Then they both left. I moved away from a small group of spouses who were left behind for the meeting and headed to the far side of the large pool, away from the party's patio. There was a wicker swing chair hanging from chains, partially in the shadows. It was visible enough that people could see me if they looked, but not so obvious that I'd stand out. It was an ideal spot for me to gather my thoughts. Less than 5 minutes after I sat down, a voice broke the silence. "So, this is where you're hiding," a voice said softly. Looking up, I saw Barbara sliding into the wicker swing beside me. She positioned herself facing me slightly, without me needing to say anything. Her little black dress clung to her tanned thighs, subtly highlighting her figure without giving too much away. It was both alluring and innocent. The fact that I noticed this almost like an observer spoke volumes about my state of mind. "You seem like you're carrying a huge burden," she said. Talking about my problems with my wife's lover's daughter was the last thing I wanted, no matter how attractive she was. "We've just had a lot of audits at the office," I said, hoping to end the conversation. "Really?" Barbara responded, showing genuine interest. "I just finished my last accounting course at school. We spent quite a few classes discussing forensic accounting and its role in law enforcement. I found it really intriguing." That caught me off guard, even in my current state. "Seriously?" I asked, not quite believing it. "It's not exactly glamorous," she said, "but it's like detective work. You sift through a huge amount of information to find the right pieces and then piece them together to see the full picture. It's even more challenging when people try to hide the information." "Most people don't see it that way," I agreed. Barbara went into great detail about what she had learned and why she found it so interesting. I was actually impressed. I've seen interns at the firm who couldn't explain the topic as well. Focusing on her words helped me push aside my anger and her looks, allowing me to slip into a mentoring role. It provided a bit of relief from my emotional distress. "You really did enjoy the class," I said. "You have a great understanding of the subject." Barbara blushed at the compliment. For a moment, the glamorous image faded, and I saw a genuinely touched young woman. "I've thought about joining the FBI after I graduate," she shared. "Dad wants me to either become a prosecutor or work at one of his friend's law firms, but I'm not sure that's what I want. You should pursue your own goals rather than just following your father's path." I meant it sincerely, even though I wouldn't mind disrupting that guy's plans. I've collaborated with the FBI when audits revealed criminal activity. They're sharp professionals. Before Barbara could respond, Ashley emerged from the shadows. "So, this is where you've been hiding? You weren't up to any mischief, were you?" she asked playfully. Barbara faced my wife with a bright smile. "We were just discussing Bob's job. I recently studied it in class and wanted to hear from an expert." "Hogan is definitely that," Ashley said proudly. "I once read an audit report where an employee was embezzling funds using his boss's login. Hogan figured out that transfers happened while the boss was away on a trip, but the logins were from the corporate office. Most people would have stopped there, but Hogan dug deeper. I could have secured a conviction on that employee my first day out of law school. Hogan practically did the DA's job for them." Ashley's pride in me was evident, and it threw me off. How could she be so proud and loving while carrying on a 6-month affair with her boss? My confusion must have shown as Ashley asked, "What's the matter, dear?" "Nothing," I replied. "Just thinking about a problem." "Stop that! It's a party," Ashley chided me. Without missing a beat, she added, "Hogan, you won't believe the opportunity I've been given. Paul and Margaret want me to move into an administrative role before I go on maternity leave. That way, when I leave, no cases will be left unresolved. I'll be working directly with Margaret." A part of me felt relieved at the thought of Ashley being away from Paul, but my hope was short-lived. "I'll need to travel occasionally," Ashley continued. "I'll be delivering sensitive documents to Paul during his campaign. I won't be involved in his campaign, but I'll still get to see some of the behind-the-scenes action. It's going to be so exciting." I felt my heart break all over again. Even though Ashley said she was ending her affair to focus on having a baby, I could easily see her slipping back into the affair once she got involved in the campaign. And if she did get pregnant, how could I be sure it was mine? Paul is about my size and looks like me. Without a DNA test, it would be nearly impossible to tell. My anger started to build up, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't the moment to lose control. Barbara and Ashley started chatting about her new role in the campaign. They quickly got absorbed in their discussion, and I was left out. I used the chance to pull myself together. After tonight, I would begin making a plan. I needed a way to combat Paul's political influence, but honestly, I had no idea how to start. 2 days later, the solution walked into my office. "Your 4 o'clock appointment is here," my assistant announced through the open door. "We're not allowed to call them secretaries anymore." I checked my Outlook calendar and didn't see any appointments scheduled. Before I could respond, she walked in. Barbara Evans. "Hi, Hogan," she said as she entered. Her long, dark red hair cascaded down her shoulder. She wore a light sundress that highlighted her beautiful legs and sandals with straps that wrapped almost up to her knees. Her chest was modestly covered with no cleavage visible, but the fabric hugged her suggestively. The dress was held up by 2 thin straps, leaving her arms bare. I was at a loss for words as I watched her walk in. "I hope this isn't a problem," Barbara said as she shut the office door behind her. I told Mary we were meeting to talk about my career and how Ashley works for my dad. I stood up politely. "It's good to see you. I was just working on some reports." I pointed to the chairs in front of my desk. After she sat down, I took my seat. "What would you like to discuss?" Barbara's cheerful expression quickly faded. "I think you already know, Bob. I saw your reaction when you spoke with my awful father. I'm really sorry he's causing you trouble." I was taken aback. This wasn't what I expected at all. "What are you talking about?" I asked carefully. Barbara looked troubled. "It's about my father having an affair with your wife." I slumped back in my chair, shocked by her directness. "Did you just find out?" Barbara asked softly. I nodded. "I'm sorry." "How? When did you find out?" I inquired. "About 3 months ago," Barbara said. "I'm not sure when it started, but I discovered it in February. I went home early one Friday and found them having one of their meetings at our house. I was supposed to have a late lunch with a high school friend, so I just dropped by to say hello and leave. Dad asked when I'd be back, and I said after dinner. Then my friend got sick and couldn't come. I picked up some lunch and went back home. That's when I saw my dad and Ashley having closeness in our hot tub. I took photos, including some of them running without clothes back into the house. There was a foot of snow outside, too. "You took pictures of your dad having closeness?" I asked, astonished. I also wondered if I could get copies of those photos. They would be very useful for the divorce. Barbara seemed to sense my thoughts. She reached into her bag, pulled out a large envelope, and set it on my desk. "These are the photos from that day, plus a few extras." Barbara gave a sly smile. "Dad has a security system at the house. It covers the entire outside and several rooms inside. If you have the website, key fob, and password, you can access everything from almost anywhere. There's also a thumb drive with video footage." I was stunned. Paul's daughter was giving me everything I needed for both the divorce and to take down her father. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. Barbara's sad expression shifted to anger. "Because," she said softly, "I loathe that bastard more than you ever could." I stayed silent and waited. After a brief pause, she began to explain. "My dad met my mom when she was a college student. He was a rookie lawyer assigned to an intimate crimes unit in Philadelphia. My mom had come from Ireland for school. Her wealthy family was killed in Londonderry, so she moved here to escape the troubles." Her tone became softer, echoing her mother's accent. "Mom was dating a loser who beat her badly enough that she ended up in the emergency room." Barbara placed a thick green and lace-covered book on my desk. "After her death, I found her journal, and I learned she was quite submissive. She liked a strong man who took charge. This jerk pushed her too far, leading to her hospitalization. Dad was assigned to her case. They met, he sent the jerk to jail, and a year later, they were married. Dad was always ambitious. He got a smart, beautiful woman with an exotic accent. Mom got a strong man who would protect her. I was born a few years later. Dad pushed me into gymnastics, thinking it would boost his political career if I made it to the Olympics. Do you know what usually ends gymnastics careers?" I shook my head and replied, "Never really thought about it." Barbara grinned. "They call it the 3 Bs. I was pushed into cheerleading and told to be the perfect all-American girl. I didn't mind performing, but by the time I was 16, I realized I was just a tool for my dad's ambitions. My mom figured it out early on. Dad was cheating almost from the start of their marriage. She knew and pleaded with him to stop, but she was too powerless to do anything. Being a staunch Catholic, divorce was not an option for her." Barbara paused to collect her thoughts. After a moment, she went on. Sometimes I wonder if her poor response to cancer treatment was because she unconsciously wanted to die, or was intentionally undermining her treatment. Anyway, I was with her when she passed away. The official story says Dad was in court winning a murder conviction. In reality, he had the doctor change the time of death while he was at his assistant's apartment, celebrating. He paraded Mom as his trophy, and the media loved the story of the heroic DA saving the battered woman. He even hit her a few times that I saw. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, feeling confused. "Because you don't deserve this, Hogan. My dad is a terrible person. After Mom died, he kept his affairs quiet until I went to college. That's when he started having these meetings at the house. They're not just for work. He also holds them for charity groups he's involved with. I know he's involved with 2 other women from those groups. One of them even thinks it's true love and plans to leave her husband." "Is that what Ashley believes?" I inquired, even though I was already pretty sure of the answer. Barbara shook her head. "No, she seems to think it's just fun. They say power is the greatest aphrodisiac, and Ashley seems to prove that. I overheard her talking to my dad about a senator they met with and how excited she was when she returned to Doylestown. The bluntness of her comment made me wince. I remembered that night well. I'd come home to an incredibly passionate wife, and it had been one of the best nights of closeness in my life. That memory was now tainted because I realized my wife had probably been thinking about someone else. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Barbara met my gaze firmly as she replied, "My goal is to get you out of your marriage to that cheater and ruin my father's career so he couldn't get elected even as a dog catcher in a town full of cats. I considered leaking this information to the press or the opposition, but he has too many connections. I think if we work together, we can make them pay. Won't that complicate your schooling?" I asked. She tossed her deep red hair as she shook her head. "No, my mom left me a trust fund. I haven't used it yet, but if necessary, I could cover the rest of my education and even get an MBA while still having a nice sum left over." "Why didn't your mom use that money to leave and go to Ireland, where your dad couldn't reach her?" Barbara's expression turned troubled. She was raised in a very strict Irish Catholic environment. She was taught that divorce was not an option. No matter what happened, she stuck to her faith until the end. I think this is why I believe her death might have been more about a lack of will to live rather than a deliberate choice, as self-ending was seen as an unforgivable sin in her view. Barbara appeared genuinely sincere, and her desire to ruin her father's career seemed genuine. With the information I had, it looked like she was committed to this cause. There didn't seem to be any trap here. If Ashley and Paul wanted to ruin me, they could do it openly in court. This kind of sneaky behavior was only for someone who was desperate, like me. A plan began to form in my mind. I would need Barbara's help with several aspects. At the very least, this would show how serious she was about taking down her father. "All right," I said, "but I don't want to use these photos or even mention him in my divorce." Barbara looked taken aback. "Why not?" she asked, her face reddening with emotion as she prepared to argue. I stopped her with a raised hand. "I'm not saying we won't go after him, but I want to avoid the negative publicity of being the betrayed husband in a political scandal. Instead, I want to dismantle his power and influence so I can get a quiet divorce without drawing unwanted attention." Barbara looked at me, clearly surprised. A moment later, a cunning smile appeared on her face. "What do you need me to do?" I grinned. "I'm going to use my skills. Get me access to his financial records, both personal and campaign-related. Capone was caught through tax evasion, and I'm sure I can find something in your father's files. If I can't find anything..." "What then?" she asked. I smirked. "I'll create some evidence myself." In the following 3 days, Barbara and I were hard at work. She installed a keylogger on both her father's personal laptop and the home desktop. Additionally, she backed up the entire hard drive of his computer. We configured their security system to upload its footage to a cloud storage I knew about, hosted overseas. It was quite convenient that he had set up so many cameras in his own house. As for me, I didn't bother tapping into Ashley's phone. With the evidence Barbara provided, I didn't need anything else. I did, however, set up a GPS tracker designed for parents to monitor their children. It used cell towers for general positioning but could be activated for precise tracking. I just wanted to avoid any surprises at home while I was working. The day after Barbara's visit, I pretended to have a groin injury. This gave me a reason to avoid having closeness with my wife. I never thought I'd need an excuse to avoid intimacy with my beloved wife. Given the number of Paul's affairs, I wasn't willing to take any more risks. Besides, I probably couldn't have done it without letting my anger show. I scheduled an appointment with a doctor to get tested for STDs. At first, nothing showed up, but some infections, like HIV, can take months to be detectable. Ashley left for her final meeting with Paul at the conference in Pittsburgh, clearly excited. She had been eager to go, especially after I had kept her waiting for a few days. Some men might have given her a parting gift as revenge, but my feelings were more complicated. Although I could never trust her again, a part of me still loved her. The thought of being intimate with her after what I had learned was unbearable. By Thursday morning, Ashley was ready with her bag and waiting for Paul and a junior lawyer from their office who was accompanying them. I wondered if the young lawyer was aware that he was just a cover. As Ashley approached, she dropped her bag by the front door and came up behind me. I was sitting at the table with my back to her, sipping coffee. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered in my ear, "I'll be back Sunday afternoon. Hopefully, you'll be feeling better and we can start working on the baby." Her voice and scent made me nostalgic, almost making me cry. I managed to stay composed. "I'll keep icing it so I'll be all set when you get back," I said, patting her arm and kissing her forehead. She sighed. "I wish I didn't have to go. It would be so much nicer to stay home with you and be naked all weekend." "You could always tell Evans that something more important came up," I suggested. It was a slip of the tongue, and she seemed to notice something in my tone. "What's your issue with Paul?" she asked, sounding surprised. "First, you were rude at the party, and now you seem to hate him." I took a deep breath and shrugged. "Honestly, I've seen too many big shots like Evans who think they're invincible and full of power. They create an illusion of authority and get people to believe it, like that mayor in South Carolina last year. He was a supposedly powerful guy embezzling money and sleeping with married women. Now he's serving 10 years in federal prison, and everyone he was involved with is publicly shamed and divorced. Evans gives me the same impression. If he makes it to Washington, he'll be involved with clueless interns within a week, but eventually his facade will crumble, and everyone around him will get caught in the mess." Ashley looked at me in disbelief. Although she had heard me rant about shady characters before, I had never connected Evans to them. I probably should have kept my thoughts to myself, but it felt good to vent. Even though our marriage was over, I thought it was fair to give Ashley a warning. Despite everything, I still loved her, even though I could never trust her again. "Hogan, that's a terrible accusation about Paul," Ashley said, sounding upset. "He's a good man who has done a lot for this county. He's not like that." Her denial had a pleading tone. Just then, a car horn honked outside the house. Paul had arrived. Ashley sighed in frustration and shot me a brief, irritated look that quickly turned into a mix of regret and what seemed like fear. "I'll be back in 4 days," Ashley said gently. "We can talk then, but be prepared, because we need to start working on having a baby." She pulled me into a passionate kiss, which I returned with equal intensity. "Have a good week," she whispered. "I love you. I love you too," I replied. Ashley picked up her bag and opened the front door. "Bye, dear," she called as she left. "Goodbye, Ashley," I said as I closed the door behind her. Half an hour later, I headed to catch the train to the city. Barbara and I had an appointment with the FBI. It turned out I didn't need to fabricate any evidence. Paul Evans' embezzlement techniques were moderately clever. Barbara and I met at her off-campus apartment to review the documents she had retrieved from his computer. The methods were fairly standard. I estimated that he had around $2 million hidden in an offshore account. While he had funneled that much money, I couldn't be sure if it was still there since those records weren't included. Most of the funds came from numerous small donors who wouldn't typically attract IRS scrutiny, but it was unusual that out-of-state people were contributing to a county DA's campaign. I traced several donors to individuals connected to cases where charges were dropped or plea deals were unusually lenient. Barbara uncovered the biggest revelation. The revelation was a big deal. It turned out she wasn't an only child. Evans had fathered 2 other children. One child was born 3 years before his wife's death, with the mother being one of his staff members. The other child was born 8 months after his wife died, and the mother was an 18-year-old volunteer from the hospital where his wife was treated. Evans had been funneling $2,000 a month to each woman, disguised as poll research consultants from campaign funds. Barbara's anger was so intense that she nearly wrecked her apartment. That red hair of hers is definitely a sign of trouble. By the time Ashley and Paul left, we had thoroughly examined Paul's records. Although we had most of the information, some questions remained unanswered due to our lack of resources. I documented all the findings and arranged a meeting with a senior FBI agent from the Philly office whom I had previously worked with. Barbara joined me to present the story we had prepared. Barbara's story was that after completing her forensic accounting class, she became interested in examining some real records. She decided to review her father's records out of innocent curiosity. When she noticed some irregularities, she reached out to me because my wife worked for her father and she knew of my expertise. Gary, the FBI agent, was a seasoned professional who suspected there was more to the story but didn't press us because we had essentially handed him a prime case. A corrupt DA in his own district, a corrupt DA who was running for the Senate. It was a case that could make his career falling into his lap like a gift from above. We took a cab back to Barbara's apartment since she had a late afternoon class, while I walked to 30th Street Station to catch my train home. I was considering packing up and leaving before Ashley returned. Gary assured me that he would expedite the case and aim to subpoena Evans' records by Wednesday. Once the investigation became known, it wouldn't be long before Evans realized how fragile his power was when everyone started abandoning him. Ashley called me while I was on the train home. She explained she was calling early because they had a big dinner planned, and she wouldn't be back to her room until very late. I had no doubt she actually had no intention of returning to her room that night. I responded with some vague comments saying it was fine. She noticed my distracted tone and asked what was wrong. "I just had a meeting with some FBI agents about a case," I said. "I'm on the train right now, and since the investigation is ongoing, I can't discuss it." That was all true. "It seems like it really affected you," Ashley said with concern in her voice. "Yeah, it's going to be a messy situation. It'll probably make national news when everything comes out," I explained. "Really?" Ashley asked, sounding curious. "Can't you give me a hint?" I couldn't resist. "Corrupt politician, bribes, money laundering, scandals, marital affairs, and kids involved. Just typical summer novel stuff," I replied. Is it someone I know?" she asked. I grimaced. "I've already said too much. The Bureau would be upset if I revealed anything else," I said. "Oh, you're no fun," Ashley pouted. "Don't worry. Your secret is safe with me." After saying our goodbyes, she hung up. When I got home, the reality of my situation hit me hard. My marriage was over. We'd been together for 10 years, both dating and married. I never expected to be single again. But now that was my reality. I ended up sitting on the couch, watching as the sun set. It felt like I was observing my life slipping away. I sat there, unmoving, for hours after the sun had disappeared. By noon on Saturday, I finally emerged from my self-pity. Although I felt I deserved a bit of indulgence, I knew I needed to move on. Ironically, while I was mowing the lawn, a BMW convertible pulled into my driveway. I stopped the mower and watched as Barbara got out. The first thing I noticed was her long, pale legs swinging out of the driver's side. She wore sandals with thin cords wrapped halfway up her calves, reminding me of ancient Greek styles. As she stepped out, her sculpted legs flexed, showing off the strength beneath her firm skin. Sticking with the Greek theme, she had on a pure white dress that resembled a toga, stopping mid-thigh with 2 inches of lace at the bottom, giving glimpses of her upper thighs. The dress, made of a light, silky material, clung to her curves and was slightly see-through. A top was visible through the dress. Her bare arms, marked with light freckles, were exposed, and the dress draped over one shoulder, leaving the other bare. Her long red hair flowed in waves over her shoulders. Yet it was her gray-green eyes and her smile that truly caught my attention as she came closer. I turned off the engine and greeted her. "You look better than I expected," Barbara remarked. "I thought I might have to drag you out of a bottle or off a ledge." I snorted, recalling the dark thoughts I'd had the previous night. "It needed to be done," I replied, "and it keeps me occupied." "Not meeting with a lawyer?" she inquired. I shrugged. "I met with one Tuesday before they even left. The paperwork will be ready by Monday. I set up an audit in Austin and plan to leave Tuesday. Typically, this kind of assignment takes 3 days of travel, followed by remote work until the report is done. For this one, though, I'll stay there for the full 3 weeks." I shrugged again. "It might be the easy way out, but I'd rather not be here when everything falls apart." Barbara's expression showed she understood, recognizing that this situation would also draw attention to her as the bastard's daughter. "I'm glad you're planning ahead," she said with a smile. "I've noticed that's something you're good at." That smile appeared again. "Now, I can make my own plans." "Here's my plan," Barbara declared. "I'll help you wrap up your work here, and then you'll come over to my place. We're going to have a great time, and you can check me out as much as you want. I've got a swimsuit that you're going to love." Her enthusiasm was so high it could have revived the dead. I tried to push back. "Barbara, I'm still married," I said, "and I'm not ready to dive into anything right now." "You need to blow off some steam before you blow up," she countered with a seductive smile. Besides, you know the saying, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Her look was a mix of playful, mischievous, and sincere, making me chuckle. In a twist of fate that felt straight out of a novel, we ran into Nicole. After finishing my yard work, I cleaned up, and Barbara and I went out for a late lunch at a nice restaurant. Although I wasn't in the mood for revenge closeness, it felt good to leave the house. Going out with someone as pleasant as Barbara, and who looked as stunning as she did, wasn't a burden. When I arrived, I noticed Nicole's car parked near the restaurant. I always thought it was tacky to put OBX and Jersey Shore stickers on a Mustang GT. For a moment, I considered telling Barbara to find another place to eat. Instead, I did something completely out of character. On a sudden impulse, despite all my meticulous planning, seeing Nicole's car just hit me hard. With a spontaneous move, I put my arm around Barbara and guided her into the restaurant without another word. I gave the host a tip to seat us at a specific table. It was somewhat hidden but visible from the restrooms. I had Barbara sit with her back to the room and I took the seat next to her. She smiled when I held her hand. "Why the sudden change?" Barbara asked with a playful smile. "Not that I mind," I chuckled. "I told you about discovering my wife's infidelity, right? Nicole, her friend? Well, her car is parked right outside." Barbara burst into a hearty laugh. "So, I get to be the other woman? That works for me." She leaned in and gave me a tender kiss. It wasn't passionate, but rather a soft, suggestive kiss, like a promise of more to come. Our food arrived, and I was genuinely enjoying myself. The deception faded into the background as I savored Barbara's company. Her quick wit had me in stitches. I had never heard someone make accounting sound so risque. While we were chatting, I noticed Nicole walking by and pointed her out to Barbara. "Oh, great," Barbara giggled. "I've been waiting for this." With that, she leaned in to kiss me again. My hand found its way under the table and onto her leg. Her thighs were incredibly soft, but with a firm, toned muscle underneath. The sensation was electrifying. I could feel the heat from her panties, and my hand moved instinctively to explore the moisture there. Lost in the moment, I was jolted by Nicole's loud voice. "Hogan, what are you doing?" she shouted. "Who is this woman? Cheating on your wife while she's away? I thought better of you." I'm sure everyone in the restaurant heard her. I pulled away from Barbara and faced Nicole. "What's your issue, Liv? Just having some fun before Ashley and I settle down and start a family. And can you lower your voice? People are trying to eat." Nicole stared at me, stunned. "What? Come on, Liv. Ashley is doing the same thing. She's probably with her boss right now. She's been cheating for months. So I figured it was only fair for me to be with the boss's daughter." Nicole looked like she was about to faint. I felt Barbara start to chuckle, so I gave her a gentle squeeze to quiet her. Unfortunately, I forgot where my hand was, and her giggle turned into a moan of pleasure. "You're aware of—" Nicole stumbled over her words. "Yep, I'm supposed to be the clueless, loyal husband while my wife is off having her fun with someone I thought was a good friend," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. Nicole flinched at the bitterness in my tone. "I know Ashley wanted one last adventure before we started a family, just like she had one last fling before we got married. If she can do it, why do you have a problem with me?" I had no proof that Ashley had been unfaithful before she got involved with Paul, but I was guessing based on the idea that once a cheater, always a cheater. I wondered if Nicole was rattled enough to confirm my suspicion. She was. "You know about that too?" she exclaimed in shock. "Not until now, but thanks for confirming," I said. Nicole turned pale. "Leave now, Nicole," I told her. She quickly got up and left the table. We soon heard a commotion indicating she had exited the restaurant. "Well, that was entertaining," Barbara said with a chuckle. "I was hoping she'd stick around longer." Her smile made me blush. "She's probably calling your wife right now," Barbara added. "Most likely," I agreed. "I expect my phone to ring in about 5 minutes, but it'll take her 5 hours to get home from Pittsburgh if she leaves immediately. That gives us time for dessert and enough time for me to get home and pack. Sorry, I won't get to see you in that bikini you promised." Barbara laughed again. "We can definitely reschedule that," she said, reaching over to pull me closer by my shirt. "My semester ends in a week and a half," she whispered in my ear. "I've always wanted to visit Austin." Before I could fully process her words, her tongue was in my ear. Epilogue. Yes, things went seriously wrong. Ashley began calling me just 10 minutes after Nicole left the restaurant. I listened to a few of her voicemails where she was enraged about my cheating. It almost made me laugh. After an hour of her messages and texts, I decided to block her number. I knew she would eventually try contacting me from another phone, But since she was driving back from Pittsburgh, she couldn't easily borrow someone else's phone on the turnpike. I went home, packed up all my personal belongings, not just what I needed for Austin, and left my house, probably for the last time. A hotel near the Philly airport became my temporary home after I dropped most of my stuff in a storage locker while searching for a new place. I spoke with Barbara a few times. She was staying with a friend as her father started leaving angry messages on her phone. I rescheduled my flight to Austin to leave a day earlier and flew out Monday morning. Ashley called me from different numbers, leaving tearful messages about how I could do this to her and questioning why I would ruin her career. Nicole's initial outburst had attracted a lot of attention. Someone posted a detailed account on their blog, identifying Barbara and me as the key figures. My comment about Ashley's affair with Paul was also shared, along with news that they were together in Pittsburgh over the weekend. This stirred up a lot of buzz in the local political scene and courthouse. For the rest of the week, I steered clear of Philly news. It wasn't until Friday that I received an email from Margaret, a senior manager at the DA's office in Doylestown. She expressed her apologies for the chaos, acknowledging that she knew Paul was seeing two women outside the office, but was unaware of Ashley's involvement. She also complimented my use of legal means to get revenge against a lawyer. Margaret reported that Paul was at the DA's office on Monday morning, trying to manage the fallout and deny any wrongdoing on his part. He claimed it was just my daughter's rebellion influenced by a cheating husband, was the story he tried to spin. Then, on Tuesday, Ashley received divorce papers citing adultery. The envelope contained photos, DVDs, and a letter from me. When Ashley read my note, her horrified scream brought Margaret and two others rushing into her office. Ashley sat there in shock, slumped in her chair, while Margaret noticed the pictures scattered on the desk. In my letter, I explained that I hadn't had an affair, but hoped she understood how I felt about her and the jerk. I told her I couldn't stay married to someone I no longer trusted, especially knowing she had been unfaithful before. Not much work got done at the DA's office that Tuesday. The following day, while Margaret was in Paul's office for a meeting, 4 men in suits walked in unexpectedly. Paul was shouting at them for disrupting an important meeting when one of the men informed him he was under arrest. According to Margaret, Paul was stunned when they cuffed him and escorted him out of the office. They paraded him out the courthouse's front door, passing reporters who had somehow been tipped off. I owed Gary a few beers for that. Margaret ended her email by apologizing for the chaos in her office and offering to help with anything I might need, saying I didn't deserve this kind of situation. While some of her message was probably to manage the fallout, I believed Margaret was being the principled, professional person I always thought she was. My plans for a quiet divorce were ruined by my own reckless, impulsive act with Nicole at the restaurant. Philly news stations quickly picked up on Paul's arrest and the charges against him. As I told Ashley, this had all the elements of a summer novel: closeness, betrayal, revenge, and way too much drama. The media loved it, and it was swiftly picked up by the 24-hour news networks. Since I was out of town, I managed to avoid the worst of the media frenzy. They hadn't tracked me down yet, as I had booked a second hotel room 10 miles away from the one listed on my work itinerary. Even though I had checked into this new place, reporters were still camped out trying to catch me. I saw on TV that they were stationed outside my house, but since Ashley wasn't coming out, they only managed to get footage of my in-laws coming and going. Barbara had the toughest time as the daughter who turned in her own father. Despite needing to attend classes and take exams, the media easily found her during the initial days. The situation improved when the school intervened and removed the reporters from campus, as they were causing too much disruption. It also helped when the two women who had children with Paul came forward to seek their moment of fame. After finishing her last final, Barbara quietly left campus and went to the airport. The media was disappointed, but not entirely surprised when she didn't show up for the graduation ceremony. Eventually, the story became a minor news item and remained in the background. It made headlines again when Paul's trial began, but he pleaded guilty to several charges, resulting in a 20-year sentence in federal prison. Fortunately, his guilty plea meant Barbara and I were never required to testify. After that, the media lost interest, and the attention shifted away from Barbara, Ashley, and me. Strangely, despite all the media attention, my divorce proceeded swiftly and without much trouble. Ashley signed the divorce papers just 4 days after receiving them. In her letter, she apologized for her actions and for what had happened between us. She had been furious and vowed never to forgive me for my infidelity, but realizing she was the only one who had been unfaithful made her see how hypocritical her anger was. She accepted the 50/50th split offer and asked if, at some point when things weren't so raw, we could meet so she could apologize in person. She ended her letter by expressing that she would always love me and wished me well. I later learned from her mother that Ashley had left her job and moved to the Midwest to live with an aunt. Bringing Paul down greatly boosted my career. The FBI publicly credited me for analyzing Paul's records. While I was staying out of the media's way, I worked even harder on the Austin case. Not only did I uncover the embezzler they were after, but I also discovered a second one they hadn't known about. My firm recognized my efforts by promoting me to lead a team specializing in white-collar crimes. Someone even humorously dubbed our team Hogan's Heroes. The highlight was getting an assistant assigned to me. This assistant was a recent college graduate eager to gain experience in forensic accounting. Working late became surprisingly enjoyable with her around. Plus, seeing that swimwear on my hotel room floor added an extra perk.